The lights went out in Angola Prison just before midnight. A loud buzz echoed through the iron halls, followed by screams from inside cell block C, the section known as the cage. Guards rushed toward the sound, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Inmates were shouting, banging on the bars. "Someone's loose!" a guard yelled. "Lock it down! Lock it down now!" But it was already too late. One of the most dangerous men in the Louisiana State Penitentiary, Raymond Razor Cole, had escaped his cell. Blood smeared the wall near his door. His cellmate was missing. A trail of red footprints led down the corridor toward the laundry room. Sergeant Mills, a veteran guard who had worked at Angola for 20 years, held his radio close. "All units, we have a breach. I repeat, Razor Cole is out of his cell." Then the radio went dead. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. Somewhere in the dark, a man laughed, low and cold. No one could see where it came from. That was the night Angola Prison would never forget. Angola, once a slave plantation, and is the largest maximum security prison in the United States. It sits deep in the Louisiana countryside, surrounded by swamps and razor wire. Nearly 6,000 men live behind those walls. Some are serving life sentences. Some will never walk out again. For most of them, time moves slowly, one sunrise after another, but not in cell block C. That block held the worst of the worst. Men who had taken lives, men who had tried to escape, and men who weren't afraid to die trying again. Razor Cole was one of them. He was tall, quiet, and dangerous. Rumor had it he once bit off another man's ear in a fight. He didn't talk much, but everyone knew his name. The guards didn't look him in the eye. Even other inmates stayed clear of him. When he first came to Angola, they said he had changed, that he was reading the Bible and keeping to himself. But deep down, Razor was just waiting. He watched. He listened. He planned. His cellmate, a skinny man named Davis, often bragged that he was going to escape someday. The others laughed at him. Razor didn't. He just smiled. That slow, dangerous smile that made people nervous. 1 week before the blackout, strange things started happening. A spoon went missing from the cafeteria. A guard's keyring was found bent open. And in the laundry room, a metal pipe was discovered loose near the back wall. No one paid much attention until that night. When the lights went out, Razor made his move. He had been waiting for it, the perfect storm. The guards were distracted because of a fight in another block. The cameras flickered, and in the few seconds of darkness, Razor struck. By the time the emergency lights came on, his cell was empty. Sergeant Mills ran down the hall, shouting orders. "Check every cell! Count every one!" His heart was pounding. Razor had been locked up for double murder, and if he was out, someone was already in danger. Then a guard screamed from the laundry room, "Sir, you need to see this." Mills ran over, and his flashlight stopped on the floor. There, lying face down in a pool of blood, was Davis, Razor's cellmate. His throat was cut open, and on the wall, written in red, were the words, "Angola ain't a prison, it's a hunt." Mills froze. Behind him, the heavy metal door creaked. Someone, or something, was standing in the shadows. The guard's flashlight flickered once, then the power went out again, and that was when the real nightmare began. The emergency alarms blared across Angola Prison. Red lights flashed on the concrete walls, bathing everything in a dark, bloody glow. Guards ran in every direction, shouting commands, slamming heavy metal doors, and locking down every block they could. But cell block C, the cage, was chaos. Inmates were yelling, banging their fists against the bars, chanting Razor's name like he was some kind of legend. "Razor's out!" they screamed. "Razor's loose!" Sergeant Mills gritted his teeth and barked into his radio. "I need all units in C block. We've got a killer on the loose." Static. No one answered. He didn't know it yet, but Razor wasn't alone. In the hours before his escape, Razor had made a deal with 2 other inmates, Clarence Kenote Boone, a bank robber who had been in and out of Angola more times than anyone could count, and Floyd Dog Jefferson, a lifer with a temper that could snap like dry wood. Razor promised them something no one else could: freedom. The 3 of them had spent months working in the laundry room, quietly watching the guards, timing their breaks, studying the locks. They had even figured out how to short-circuit the cameras using a piece of wire stripped from an old radio. And now, their plan was in motion. Razor and his two partners had crawled through a narrow vent behind the dryers, one that led deep into the old tunnels under Angola, tunnels built back when the prison was still a plantation. The tunnels were dark, wet, and full of rats. But to Razor, they smelled like freedom. Meanwhile, above ground, Sergeant Mills and his team were losing control. Inmates were shouting through the bars, "Yo, officer, Razor's down there, man. He's gonna gut y'all next." Mills tried to ignore them, but something inside him twisted. He'd been working at Angola long enough to know when fear was real, and this was real. Arden, Mr. Harlow, arrived minutes later, red-faced and furious. "Mills, how did this happen?" "I don't know, sir. Power failure, maybe sabotage. Cole killed his cellmate and vanished." "Find him," Harlow snapped. "He doesn't leave this prison alive." But Razor was always one step ahead. Deep in the tunnels, he moved fast, the beam of a stolen flashlight dancing over wet stone. Behind him, C-Note was panting. "Man, we really doing this, huh?" Razor didn't answer. He just kept walking, eyes sharp, knife in hand. Dog limped behind them, clutching a metal pipe. "You sure this leads out?" Razor gave a thin smile. "Everything leads out, if you're willing to bleed for it." They turned a corner and froze. There was movement ahead. A shadow, tall and slow, blocking the tunnel. "Who's that?" C-Note whispered. The flashlight flickered over the figure, a man in a torn prison uniform, eyes wide, pale face trembling. It was Officer Grant, one of the guards. His uniform was stained with blood. "Help me," he croaked. Razor stepped closer, cold and calm. "Where's the exit?" Grant's lips trembled. "You'll never make it out. They sealed it years ago." Razor tilted his head. "Then you're no use to me." Before C-Note or Dog could react, Razor slashed. The sound of the blade echoed through the tunnel. The guard fell to the ground, motionless. Dog took a step back, eyes wide. "Man, you didn't have to do that!" Razor wiped the blood from his knife on his sleeve. "You talk too much." Then, above them, there was a loud crash. A section of the tunnel roof collapsing. Dust filled the air. The flashlight went out. C-Note started coughing. "Razor, I can't see." From somewhere in the dark, Razor's voice came, low and calm. "Keep moving. We're not alone down here." Dog froze. "What do you mean, not alone?" Razor didn't answer, but just ahead, faint footsteps echo, as slow, heavy, dragging. Something, or someone, was coming through the dark toward them, and that was when the screams began. The screams echoed through the old tunnels beneath Angola Prison, bouncing off the cold, wet walls. C-Note's voice was high with terror. "What is that, man? What's down here?" Razor didn't answer. He moved forward slowly, his knife held tight in his hand. The faint beam from the broken flashlight flickered on and off, giving them flashes of the tunnel ahead. Rats, dripping pipes, and something else. Something moving. Dog's breath came fast. "Yo, Razor, I think that's—" Before he could finish, a figure burst from the shadows. It was another inmate, or what was left of one. His clothes were shredded, his eyes wide and empty. His face looked like he'd been clawing at the walls for days. C-Note screamed and swung the flashlight, hitting the man across the head. He fell, groaning. Dog kicked him hard. "Man, he's one of us." Razor leaned down, his expression cold. "Not anymore." He lifted the flashlight. The man's wrist still had a shackle on it, rusted, old, and broken. It wasn't new. Whoever this was had been trapped down there for a long time. Dog's voice shook. "You telling me this place got ghosts now?" Razor stared at the dark path ahead. "Not ghosts," he muttered. "Secrets." They kept moving, deeper into the tunnel, following a narrow path that smelled of mold and rot. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe. Up above, Angola's sirens were still blaring, and the prison yard lights cut through the fog, but down here, it felt like another world entirely. Meanwhile, Sergeant Mills and Warden Harlow had gathered a search team on the surface. "Get me every man you can," Harlow ordered. "They went underground. I want those tunnels sealed." Mills nodded, his face pale. "Sir, if they're in the old plantation tunnels, we'll lose them. There are miles of passageways down there. Most of them haven't been mapped in decades." "Then map them," Harlow snapped. "Before Razor Cole turns Angola into a graveyard." Back below, Razor's small group finally reached a large iron door covered in grime and cobwebs. C-Note pointed. "That's gotta be it, man. That's the way out." Dog grabbed the handle and pulled. Nothing. Locked tight. Razor stepped forward, inspecting the door. There was an old keypad next to it, half broken, half covered in dust. "Electrical lock," he murmured. "It connects to the old grid." C-Note frowned. "You gonna hack it or something? We ain't got no tools." Razor didn't respond. Instead, he knelt and pulled a small metal object from his shoe, a bent spoon, sharpened at the end. He slid it into the keypad panel, twisting until sparks flew. The door buzzed. A low hum filled the tunnel. Dog grinned. "You a genius, Razor." But before Razor could reply, something thudded behind them. A shadow moved fast. A hand shot out from the dark and grabbed C-Note by the neck, yanking him backward. He screamed, struggling, the flashlight falling and rolling across the ground. Dog turned. "C-Note!" The light flickered over the thing that had grabbed him. Not an inmate this time, but a prison dog. One of the massive bloodhounds used for hunting down escapees. Its fur was matted with mud and blood, and its eyes were wild. Dog froze. How the hell did that get down here? Before anyone could react, the tunnel filled with barking and heavy footsteps. Guards had released the dogs. Razor grabbed Dogs by the arm. "Move! Run!" They bolted through the iron door, just as it began to close behind them. C-Note was still screaming, dragged into the dark by the bloodhound. His voice cut off with a sickening crunch. The door slammed shut. Razor and Dog stood panting on the other side, in a wide underground chamber lined with old brick walls and rusted equipment. It smelled of oil and decay. Dog sank to his knees, shaking. "Yes! Dead, man. He's dead!" Razor said nothing. His eyes moved slowly across the room, towards something in the corner. A single light bulb flickered overhead, revealing rows of wooden boxes stacked against the far wall. Dog frowned. "What's that?" Razor walked closer. The boxes were marked with faded letters. "Property of Louisiana State Penitentiary. Evidence storage." He pulled one open. Inside were old files, photos, and blood-stained uniforms. Relics from Angola's darkest years. Dog swallowed hard. "Man, what is this place?" Razor stared at one of the photos. A black-and-white picture of guards standing over chained prisoners in the fields. "This," he said quietly, "is the real Angola." Before Dog could reply, the door behind them shook violently. The dogs were back, and so were the guards. "Freeze!" a voice shouted from the other side. Then, boom! The iron door blew off its hinges. Smoke filled the room, and through it shadows began to move. Razor tightened his grip on his knife. The hunt had just begun. The blast shook the underground chamber like a thunderstorm. Smoke and dust filled the air as guards poured through the broken doorway, flashlights cutting through the haze. Dogs barked wildly, their chains rattling, their handlers shouting commands. "Freeze! Angola State Police! Drop your weapon, Cole!" Razor stood in the center of the room, his face calm, his knife glinting under the single flickering bulb. Dog crouched behind a pile of boxes, trembling, eyes darting between Razor and the approaching guards. But Razor didn't drop his weapon. Instead, he smiled. "You're too late." Sergeant Mills stepped forward, his gun raised. "Don't test me, Cole. You're done. It's over." Razor tilted his head. "You sure about that?" Before Mills could react, Razor kicked one of the oil drums across the floor. It rolled fast, hitting a metal pipe. Sparks flew, and suddenly fire erupted, roaring to life. The chamber glowed orange as flames spread up the walls. "Back! Back!" the guards shouted, pulling their dogs away. Razor grabbed Dog by the collar and dragged him toward a side tunnel. "Move!" Dog stumbled behind him, coughing through the smoke. "You trying to kill us both, man?" Razor didn't answer. His mind was focused on one thing, the map he'd memorized. Somewhere ahead, these tunnels connected to the old drainage system that led outside the prison fence. Behind them, the guards were trying to push through the flames. "Get the extinguishers! Don't let them get away!" Mills barked orders through the radio. But every second they lost meant Razor was further away. They ran through the narrow tunnel until they reached a metal grate in the floor. Razor knelt, prying it open with the knife. Beneath it was a rushing stream of filthy water, the old drainage canal. Dog shook his head. "Nah, man, you ain't getting me in there. That's suicide." Razor turned, eyes cold. But he was quiet, careful, like a ghost. Finally, he reached the edge of the river. The muddy water stretched wide under the moonlight. He took one last breath and stepped in, the cold biting at his skin, but halfway across he froze. There was movement on the opposite bank, shadows, and the sound of boots crunching gravel. Then a familiar voice echoed across the water. "Razor Cole," Sergeant Mills called. "Don't bother swimming. You're surrounded." Razor's eyes narrowed. "Guess we'll see." He took a deep breath and dove under the water. Vanishing into the darkness, Mills aimed his flashlight at the river. The ripples spread, then went still. "Did we get him?" one guard asked. Mills frowned, eyes scanning the water. "No," he muttered. "We lost him." The river flowed quiet, but deep below something was still moving, heading toward the far bank, slow and steady. Razor Cole wasn't finished. Not yet. The river was ice cold, black as tar, and silent except for the steady splash of Razor Cole's strokes. His lungs burned, his muscles screamed, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. Above him, searchlights from the guard towers swept the water. Voices shouted, dogs barked, but the current pulled him farther downstream, away from Angola's bright lights and into the thick swamp that bordered the prison. When he finally dragged himself onto the muddy bank, Razor lay still for a long time, gasping, watching his breath fog in the night air. He could still hear the alarms faintly behind him, echoing like ghosts from the prison he'd just escaped. He sat up slowly, wiped the mud from his face, and smiled, a hard, bitter smile. For the first time in years, he was free. But freedom, Razor knew, came with a price. Somewhere in the distance, a helicopter's blades thundered through the sky. The hunt wasn't over. He stood, steadying himself, and began walking deeper into the swamp. The water reached his knees, then his waist. Mosquitoes swarmed. Every few steps he heard something splash nearby. Snakes, frogs, maybe worse. Razor didn't care. He had one goal: reach the highway before sunrise. Meanwhile, back at Angola, chaos reigned. Warden Harlow stood in the control room, staring at the glowing red dots on the map. Sensors, cameras, drones. "He's in the swamp," said Sergeant Mills, dripping wet and furious. "We've got teams moving from the north side. Dogs are tracking." Harlow slammed his hand on the table. "I want him alive, Mills. He's killed 3 people tonight, 2 guards and 1 inmate. The media's already all over it." Mills swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." He looked down at the monitor, showing thermal footage of the riverbank. The camera flickered, then went dark. "Camera 4 just died," the tech said nervously. Harlow's eyes narrowed. "That's where he is. You..." A single gunshot rang out. Then, silence. Minutes later, the search team arrived. They found the flashlight floating, the radio cracked and silent, blood in the water, but no bodies, only the knife, Razor's knife, stuck deep in a tree trunk beside the bank. Sergeant Mills was never found, and some say, on quiet nights near Angola, you can still hear the sound of a man laughing in the swamp, low, cold, and familiar. Razor Cole's story didn't end in that river. It was just beginning.